Clara Petacci was the mistress of the Italian dictator who plunged his nation into the Second World War. She was much younger than Benito Mussolini, and the two would be executed hand in hand together. Clara's obsession with Mussolini began years before, and she was obsessed with the dictator, and her dreams were all achieved when she took to his bed. But the pair, following their executions, were then shockingly taken into Milan and a public square, and their dead bodies were strung up from a service station that was half built. But the huge effect that Mussolini and Petacci's display had was felt inside a bunker, inside of the bombed-out ruins of Berlin. Adolf Hitler made preparations for his own demise following the death of his close friend, and he also would ensure that his remains never fell into the hands of his enemies, and he did not want this for his future wife and girlfriend too, Eva Braun. But what is the story behind the ruthless execution of Mussolini's mistress? Clara Petacci was the daughter of a high-profile doctor and physician, and she was born inside of Rome on the 28th of February 1912. But her father was a rather rich man, and they were very religious, as her father also served as a doctor inside of the Vatican and the Holy Apostolic Palaces for the Pope. He was holding one of the most senior doctoral positions in Italy, and he was also a prominent supporter of fascism, and he also witnessed the rise of Mussolini from nowhere to become the most senior politician across Italy. But he would give on his love and passion for fascism to his daughter Clara, who was infatuated with Mussolini from a young age. She crafted love letters to him, and she also desired and craved that one day he would reply. Mussolini was subjected to an assassination attempt, and Petacci penned another letter at the age of 14, and she said, "O Deuce, why was I not with you? Could I not have strangled that murderous woman?" And in this she was saying that he would have attacked Violet Gibson, the woman who shot Mussolini, whilst he was meeting supporters in Rome. But Clara Petacci had other dreams in life. She wanted to become an actress or a painter, and she then got engaged to an Italian Air Force officer named Riccardo Federici. The pair married in 1934. But years before she had met the man of her desires, Benito Mussolini, and on the 24th of April 1932, her future husband, along with Clara's sister and mother, were travelling from Rome to the coast when a red Alfa Grand Trism Zagata car passed them. In the driver's seat was Mussolini, and Clara, who had idolised him for so long, recognised him, and they then followed his vehicle. But Clara did manage to speak to Mussolini, and she told him that she admired him and thought he was a great man. But Mussolini had many mistresses, and he loved hearing compliments from women, and he later agreed to meet with her at the Palazzo Venezia, and the pair then began to meet more often. But very few people learned of the meetings that Petacci and Mussolini had, and they then struck up an affair and a romantic relationship. Mussolini was married, but he was a man who was rather devoted to Petacci, his mistress. Many believed that he demonstrated more love to his mistress and gave her more time than he gave his wife. His wife turned her back on Mussolini's actions, and Petacci often spoke with the dictator on a fine number of these each day, and the pair spoke at length. But his wife then got very jealous of these calls. To Clara, Mussolini felt that he could be himself, and he was very honest with her, and he claimed he had been mistaken and misunderstood most of his life, and also said he was lonely. Petacci believed he was a saviour to the Italians, but Mussolini then went further with his mistress. He gifted a lot of property and influence to Clara Petacci's family, and her father's medical practice was promoted by Mussolini and prominent fascists, and her brother also received good advancement in his career. Her uncle even painted for Mussolini, and her sister was given opportunities to become an actress. But things would change throughout the Second World War, as many people began to turn their backs in Italy on the war effort. Benito Mussolini had allied his nation with Adolf Hitler and the Nazis, and the Italian armed forces faced a number of defeats during the conflict, and many in Italy were concerned why they were even involved in the war. They thought it was Hitler's battle to fight and not theirs. But in the July of 1943, Mussolini was kicked out from power, and he was then arrested by his enemies in government. Petacci was also seized, but she was later released. However, the damage was done to the pair, as details of their relationship was then sold to the press, who carried stories about her and her family's promotions and benefits that they got from Clara sleeping with Mussolini. Mussolini was later broken out of prison in the September of 1943 in what was known as the Gran Sasso Raid, and German forces released him, and he was then placed in charge of the Italian Special Republic, a Nazi puppet state. But as the war continued against the Italians and Germans, they signed an armistice with the Allies, and Mussolini would at the end of the war be seen as a disgraceful collaborator with Hitler and a reminder of the disgraceful fascist regime in Italy. Clara Petacci continued her relationship with Mussolini, and she remained by his side until the end of their lives. Mussolini, in the April of 1945, fled towards Lake Como alongside his mistress, and the pair then tried to cross into Switzerland. But on the 27th of April, the Luftwaffe convoy that they were on, heading into Germany, was attacked by Italian partisans near to the village of Dongo. Petacci and Mussolini tried to hide, but the convoy which had stopped was attacked, and prominent fascists were handed over to the partisans, and they then discovered Petacci and Mussolini, who had managed to hide out briefly. The pair were arrested, and they were brought back together on the following day, and over the radio the capture of Mussolini was announced, and this was celebrated. It was said that an execution platoon is too much of an honour for this man. He would deserve to be killed like a mangy dog. But the execution of Mussolini was then ordered, and alongside this Petacci would also be executed, as she was said to have been a strong collaborator and a fascist, and the partisans wanted to put her to the sword too. An executioner named Walter Adioso was dispatched to execute the pair, and he went with another man named Aldo Lampredi to carry out the executions. There are slightly different accounts as to the executions of Petacci and Mussolini, but the executioners left Milan for Dongo, where they were early on the morning of the 28th of April 1945, and they then seized their victims. Adioso gave a false name and claimed he was Colonel Valerio, and the pair were taken from a farmhouse, and they were taken to a village named Gelino di Mezzagrara. Petacci and Mussolini were then taken out of the car, and they were stood outside of the Villa Belmont, a large house with a wall outside of it, and they were then approached by the executioner. At 4:10 p.m, Adioso sprayed his bullets into Mussolini and Petacci, and the pair were executed together, with many bullets littering their bodies. The pair were instantly killed, but then the ordeal continued. Clara Petacci and Mussolini's remains were taken into Milan, and specifically the Piazzale Loreto, a market square, and their remains were dumped on the floor. A crowd of thousands gathered to see the bodies of the pair, and they spat at them, kicked, and some even urinated and threw vegetables at the corpses. They were then strung up from the service station upside down on hooks above the crowd, and the ordeal continued until the Americans arrived and cut them down and took possession of their bodies. It was found that the body of Petacci was heavily disfigured by the posthumous beating, and an autopsy was not performed on her body. But as mentioned, because of Mussolini and Petacci's execution, Hitler then made preparations for his own death and demise. Clara Petacci was a young woman who was obsessed with Mussolini and the man who became the fascist dictator, and she was someone who got everything she wanted, her dream man. But she remained with him until the end, and probably believed the pair would escape together to different lands and begin a new life. However, this would never happen, and instead she was executed ruthlessly against a wall with the man that she loved. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.